Okay. So for today, um, wanting to talk about a way. it's a it tickles to talk about the myth of a way. It's like at first it sounds like a grammar error. I want to give some context here about where I'm coming from and orienting to this as part of this series. There's there are a lot of different images and experiences, some of which are actively alive and at my edge of growth for me. And some are tools that I'm really familiar with that I would love to see other people have access to. And I want to share those. I have a lot of joy in sharing those. But part of my work is, and this is part of my edge at a meta level, is finding a place from which I can share those tools in a way that is honest sharing instead of snapping into a kind of role and creating some sort of distance. I don't inherently have a problem with distance, but there's um, when I start focusing more on affecting people than I do on doing my work, then I'm not doing the work that I want to do. Even if I successfully convince other people to use these tools, it won't have good effects because it will be coming from the wrong place. So, my hope here is to share a tool, to share a perception. This dances closely with a lot of the things that I've been closely working with and that have been at my edge of growth. But the tool itself is something that clicked for me about a year and a half ago, maybe even longer. Actually, I have a date. The date was August 29th, 2019. That's when I wrote an essay where I was capturing a bunch of these ideas. I would now write that essay differently. In particular, I would title it differently. I think almost nobody read it because they were expecting it was something else. So there's this experience that really sort of caught me by surprise at one point. I want to preface all this just to add some clarity. When I'm going to talk about things that are adjacent to environmentalism, I'm not actually going to be talking about environmentalism. I might use some examples, but this is not about that. It seems important to add because I think a lot of people have a very understandable and honestly, I think, correct sort of emotional, mental immune system response to bringing up environmental jabs or points or pressures, which basically says, stop screwing with me. No, I'm not going to look at that. Ugh. Because a lot of them try to bring in some of the context of a fair bit of religious guilt. I don't think of it as religious guilt most of the time, but it is. It's a kind of religious guilt. Excuse me. We inherited it from our Western approaches to religion about using guilt as a tool to adhere to what we believe are spiritual laws and threats of punishment and damnation. So I want to honor that, yeah, there's a natural immune response to those things. And I'm not talking primarily about environmentalism, but I am going to borrow some of their language, some environmental activism language in order to highlight an experience. So this experience is something that is vivid in moment-to-moment experience. It's part of the context. It's sort of like talking about color. Color, if nobody knew what color was, but we all had color perception, it would seem important to bring something forward about these things are the same. These things are the same, but these two are different. Do you see what the sameness and difference is that I'm pointing out? We'll call this brown, and we'll call this green. There's something very powerful about having language and clear concepts for pointing at experiences that we all have, but we don't notice because we don't have our minds attuned to it. So that's what I want to bring. I want to point at something that I think most people do not have a concept for, but I think most people experience almost all the time. in almost every moment. Okay? So, so many years ago, I was in the process of taking a wrapper and putting it in the trash, and I forget, for like a hamburger or something. I don't remember, but like some kind of wrapper, tossing it away. And then above the garbage was a little sign that said, "Before you throw it away, remember, there is no away." And it sort of stopped me, and I went, huh. Because it wasn't like I didn't know. Like, if you'd asked me, well, what happens to trash after it goes in the garbage bin? I think, well, like eventually somebody collects it, and it goes to some kind of dumpster probably, and then the dumpster takes it to the dump. I don't know exactly what the mechanisms are, but somehow this happens, and then it just sits there. And I know enough about ecology and systems to recognize this is not really a sustainable method. And you contrast this with the way that nature works, that when an animal dies, its body falls over, and various decomposers come in. Rotting doesn't just happen by magic, it's happening, well, it is a kind of magic, but you get bacteria and funguses and bugs, and I know, sorry if this is terribly gross, but this is the truth. Right? And this, like, decomposers come in and break down the animal's body, and the decomposers get their food from it, which is why they're doing it, and they convert it into resources that other living systems can use, like the soil for plants to grow in. Right? The same thing happens if a tree falls or fruit rots in the ground, and the rot is again bacteria and funguses and bugs getting into it and breaking it down. So, like that's probably the grossest part of the cycle, but it's this whole system that grew together. This is the web of life. The fact that nothing could produce anything that was so alien to the environment that nothing could adapt to it. The closest thing are bones, but it turns out that when bones get wet and sit against the ground, they actually do break down. I actually learned about this pretty recently. I was a little confused about why isn't the world just covered in bones, and why isn't all the calcium concentrated in cemeteries? And it turns out, well, the reason is the biological systems have actually worked out over hundreds of millions of years how to interact. It's an emergent intelligence. You don't have to propose a designer, or you can believe in a designer. It doesn't matter. The fact is that these systems work to make it so that there is no such thing as garbage in nature. What makes something go to landfill instead, like the reason we can't throw our trash into the forest and just call it good, is because what humans put out is too overwhelming for the ecosystem of a given forest to handle. So we tuck it away in landfills. Right? And a bunch of what we produce, because of how human beings create, our creativity has vastly outstripped the rate of biological evolution. This is part of having shifted to a different gear. We're operating at the speed of mimetic evolution, the evolution of ideas. And this is so overwhelmingly faster than biology. It is of the same order of jump as when life was created. This is a little off into the weeds, but I think it's helpful context. I'm not talking about abstract woo. This is very lived, concrete systems. When you see them clearly, the whole world just lights up. The jump to human beings being able to use language was as large as the jump for the creation of life. Okay. I'm happy to stand by that claim. And it is the main reason why human beings have overwhelmed the earth. I don't necessarily mean that in a negative way. I mean, we are the biggest impactor. Like, we can create deserts. That's pretty impressive. That's a lot of power. So So back to this moment where I'm throwing away the wrapper, the thing that caught me was not, oh, I now feel guilty about it. It was more that what actually caught me was I needed the sign. Now, I'm still going to throw away the wrapper. It's like, okay, let me put it in the trash because I'm not going to carry this wrapper with me for the rest of my life. I mean, it goes in the trash. That's what else can I do? But it got me thinking, what is my relationship to the wrapper? If one of my cats dies, there's a deep emotional relationship with that process. I make a point of burying the cat or cremating the cat. And there's a caring connection that happens. And the act of that care, like I don't just throw away the body. Like I don't go, well, my kitty is gone and now I have this chunk of meat. And because of emotional stuff, I find it too hard to like do something like eat the meat or convert the pelt into something I could wear. Like, that's way too creepy. But I'll just throw it away. Into the trash it goes. I think some people do that, but there's a sense of, there's a significant shift comparing that to burying the cat. Right? That shift is really important. I found it to be consistently really, really important. Because the thing about that wrapper, when I was throwing the wrapper away, was this feeling of, it's like when I put it in the trash bin, it is then out of the universe, as far as my internal emotional experience is concerned. I think this mimics some of the experience of our ancient ancestors, when we basically were just another kind of ape, like chewing on a piece of meat, we get down to the bone, can't really do a whole lot more with the bone, maybe suck out the marrow, and then toss the bone. And now I don't care. And that's fine because my care isn't the organizing principle of the world. My care is part of the environment. So if I don't care about the bone anymore, that's fine because the rain and decomposers will take care of the bone. And the bone being there isn't going to overwhelm anything, usually. So this instinct of whatever, right, that worked for a long time. The same way that a really young child, when they're really upset with something and they just want it to go away, they just throw it away and I'm mad at that. Then having it not be there, then all the focus is on the emotion. Right? You take a thorn out of the finger and you throw the thorn away. That was the important part. The bad thing has gone away. So this is a very basic emotional response, a basic emotional orientation. I don't care about it anymore. It doesn't exist as far as my heart is concerned. It's done. So noticing that, I'm holding this wrapper and I'm noticing, there's an interesting contrast where at the time I was focused a lot on how do I save the world? I'm putting a lot of energy into it and a lot of sincere care to the best of my conscious ability. But I had no emotional connection to the act of but-up. It didn't feel like a burial. Right? It would be awfully weird to do that with a burger wrapper. Right? Or with the plastic wrapping that comes around like an electronic. Like you imagine that, like you get, like if you buy a computer game, and then around the box for the computer game is this tight plastic where the purpose of the plastic is to keep the insides preserved. What do you do with the plastic? Well, you destroy it. You cut it open. You rip it into shreds in the course of opening, taking it off of the package, and then you throw the plastic away. How long does it take the plastic to decompose? It doesn't matter. I threw it away. It's trash. I threw it away where? I want to remind you that I'm not trying to press for a particular action here. This is not about guilt. I'm not saying one shouldn't do this. I'm inviting awareness of a very particular experience, this faith in a way. It's like I notice that my heart has this capacity for a default setting, this faith in a way, this belief in this magical space, this magical place where I can take anything I like and throw it away, and now it's gone. Right? Just noticing that tiny experience. It's a very subtle thing. I notice this kind of relationship when I flush the toilet. Away. Where does it go? I don't care. It's away. I don't have to care about things that are away. Okay? I want to emphasize when I'm saying away here, this has a different flavor, usually for me, versus putting things away. It's not about the word. It's about the feeling. It's about the energy. So like when I put things away, I am caring for them. Like I've got this whole like messy tower and I'm in the middle of rearranging my bed here. So like all of this chaos, and I want to reorganize the some things for the bookcase. A lot of those things aren't where they belong. And when I put them away, it feels like that's actually caring for my things and caring for my space. It's bringing attention to them. What I'm talking about is this energetic flavor that is done. No more. Nope. I noticed this in particular with this sense of satisfaction that would come with if I'm quickly moving through the kitchen and I grab some stuff and I throw it into the trash bin. There's this experience like it's going in the trash bin, and then when I can see it's going in the trash bin, it's already away, and now I can turn my attention while it's still in midair. There's this poof, right? So that I can keep moving on to the next thing. The thing is not, is it in a place? It is, has it been sent there? Am I free? Once I am free of it, once I am free to ignore it, it is away. It is in the mythical land of away. The reason this is important is not primarily for environmental reasons. Although the environment provides a lot of really clear, it's not even metaphors, they're examples. They're very clear examples of the cost of away. Because as that sign says, remember, there is no away. The thing that I'm having an emotional relationship to is some sort of pit of non-existence. But what I'm actually doing is I am handing my responsibility for something off to someone else. I have dropped caring for it. It still exists. It still has to be dealt with. Anything I have touched, anything I have interacted with is real. It's there. So if I don't care for it, someone else has to. Maybe not a person. Like if I eat an apple down to its core, or normally I eat the core too, but only with the organic apples, because I'm given to understand that apples absorb the pesticides and pull them in towards the seeds, and I don't particularly want to eat that much concentrated pesticide. But even with the stem, the thing I do with the stem is like I find a relatively natural place at the base of a tree or something, and pop, there goes the little stem. And then it is away. But when I do that, if I just go, whatever, and I carry on, if I disconnect from it, if I treat it the same way that I treat the wrapper for the burger, there's a way where something else is happy to take responsibility for it. The decomposers of nature are very happy to take responsibility for the apple stem. Nothing is particularly happy to take responsibility for the plastic wrapping around an electronic. That's one of the big challenges we have. And if something ever does, we have a lot of problems. If some sort of fungus figures out how to eat most of our plastics, then we will be in a very interesting space where wrapping things in plastic doesn't protect them from rot anymore. So there's actually this way where the very thing that we want to use plastics for is designed to make it so that nothing wants to deal with it. It's not the only use of plastic. Plastic literally means it's malleable. That's why it's called plastic surgery. It's not that they're taking the hydrocarbons that usually are used for physical plastics and then putting them in the face. That might be part of it. But the point of plastic surgery is that it is reshaping the face. And the reshaping is applying plasticization. It's molding the face. So that's what the word plastic is actually about. So when we use the word plastic, it's sort of like using the word sculptable. Okay. So if we talked about sculptables, it would be a little bit more obvious that we're not talking about one particular kind of substance or even one particular kind of function. It just so happens that the main substance that we came up with that is super sculptable and can be shaped to just about any kind of shape that we want, that allows us to even just decide to make plastic toys. I remember having Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle play figures as a little boy. And those are absolutely plastic, made from plastic molds. You can see the seam. The chemistry of that turns out to be really super good for keeping things clean and dry. So the plastic wrapping that we put around boxes is, it's not the plasticness that we actually care about, it's the chemical properties that we use for the substance. And that we intentionally make it so that it is something that nature has a hard time with. Nature can't decompose it. So it's our intelligence versus evolution. And so far our intelligence has been winning, but it can't do that forever. It can't. And this is the basic law. I'm saying a lot of associated thoughts. There's a specific thread that I want to follow here. So the reason this matters so much is that now that we have inherited mimetic evolution, now that the human race has all of this power, the fact that there is no such place as a way is actually a description of us handing responsibility to something else. It means there are no other adults in the room. There's nothing powerful enough to compete with us or to deal with the forces that we create and then we decide that we don't want anything to do with. I want to emphasize again, this is not about environmentalism. I'll get to non-environmental examples in a moment. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of examples of this. The sheer force that we're bringing to bear means that we are seeing the actual effects of avoiding our own responsibility. And that we aren't, as a species, we are not currently taking responsibility for the transmission of responsibility. Okay, so here's a non-environmental example. So this I think is a fantastic example of the way in which we play hot potato with responsibility because of faith in a way. For quite a while, before, in BC, before COVID, when some cities had this strategy for dealing with homelessness by just paying for a bus ticket, one-way bus ticket, for any homeless people to go to some other city. Okay. Now, at first, this seems like a great solution for a city to have. We get the homeless problem to go away. But here's the problem. What if you have two cities that are near each other, like on a mutual bus route, that both use the same strategy? Now they're playing hot potato with the homeless. This actually happens. Some people, I'm given to understand, I didn't track this down myself, but I would expect this. It's just what a systems level eye sees. Like, well, if this didn't happen, I'd be really curious why not? What kind of forces prevented this from happening? But I'm told that some people went and tracked what happened to a bunch of homeless people under this kind of policy. And it turned out that they were going, a bunch of them were going through a circuit of about 5 or 6 different cities, just going from one to the next to the next to the next to the next, each one paying for their next bus ticket. So they were in effect living on buses. Okay, so the problem there is basically that everyone puts. I'm reminded of how uh, Douglas Adams, the author of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, proposed that there was a type of invisibility tech that had been distributed throughout the galaxy. Different species were using, and it could successfully cloak ships. You could use it to cloak individuals or even projects. Somehow you could make a project invisible. This technology was called an SEP field. You just apply an SEP field and then no one would be able to see it. SEP stands for someone else's problem. Faith in a way. It's a way, so I don't have to see it. It's a way, so I can't see it. So there's a way where what we're actually seeing with homelessness, or what we had been seeing before COVID, and I think this has been exacerbated, but it's very complicated with COVID. But before COVID, part of what we were seeing with homelessness was the way in which every person and every institution that had the power to do something about the homeless would see it as sort of would have an SEP field on it. The question is not, how do we clean up homelessness? It's how do we make it go away? Okay. The situation that we currently have, to pop back to environmental stuff for a moment, where we're dumping non-decomposable trash into landfills. And landfills reek. Part of the reason they reek is because we also mix in some things that can rot, and we mix in some things that no living thing wants to touch. So the whole thing is just this mess of horrid smells. Because secretly, away is one of the hidden names of hell. So but we dump all this stuff in the landfills, and now it's away, so no one has to pay attention to it. But the landfills are starting to overfill. We're running into problems with running out of landfill space. Okay? What are we going to do about that? Well, one of the solutions has been to try dumping them into the ocean, which is why we're having this floating island of garbage in the middle of the Pacific. Okay? So there's the question of, well, what would be necessary in order to actually have a clean world? Well, the answer isn't to make the landfill go away. Where would you put it? I guess if we could figure out some way to take trash and fire it into the sun, maybe that would be fine. Maybe. But the law of unforeseen consequences suggests that we might eventually start having a problem. What exactly is the problem? I don't know yet. I don't know the physics well enough to know whether it's plausible that we could actually mess up the sun's fusion process. Just as a matter of scale, I suspect that it would be incredibly hard for us to do so. But if we did start to inch towards messing with the sun's fusion reaction, how long do you think it would take the human race to change its trajectory? Like when you're shifting from environmentalism to solarism, well, that would be an interesting problem, wouldn't it? It's another manifestation of this same thing, faith in a way. How do we make our problems go away? Well, the actual answer to the landfills, the actual required answer is, we have to look at them and decide to clean them up. Someone needs to take responsibility. The same kind of thing is happening currently with space debris. We have all this junk that's floating in orbit around the Earth. It's actually getting to a point where it is a little bit difficult to launch things into space because we're talking about things like paint flecks that are going at, I think it's thousands of miles an hour, that are acting like bullets that'll smash into anything that you try to shoot up. And when you do that, what you shoot up becomes more space junk that is in orbit and adds to the problem. Right? This is the law of away. The law is there is no such thing as away. So when you try to send things to hell, I mean when you try to send things away, what happens is it piles up out of sight until it reeks and rots and collapses and falls into your vision and infects the things that you care about. That's the law. Right? It's a derived law. It's a law that emerges kind of like thermodynamics does. This isn't a basic law of reality. It's derived immediately from the fact that when I am in contact with something, it can't fail to exist because it already exists. So when I make it go away, like if I end my responsibility to it, something else has to take responsibility. And if I don't care how that happens, then that means that there's an entire mechanism that is happening outside of my vision. This was perfectly fine for human beings when we were too weak to command the entire surface of the world. But now that we are as powerful as we are the stewards of all that we can see. And one thing we can see, if we choose to pay attention, is that there is no away. I want to give a couple of other non-environmental examples to highlight how general this is. There's a mechanism, the same mechanism produces overflow in prisons. We're running into overcrowding in prisons problems, or at least we were. Everything has changed with COVID. And I'm not quite sure what's changed in the prison system. I'm guessing not much, because the faith in a way is still there. But we're running into overflow in prisons for basically the same reason that we're running into problems with overflow in landfills. And we even use the same metaphors. We talk about capturing criminals and putting them away. Okay? We sometimes even talk about such people as trash or garbage. There's a reason we choose these metaphors. Metaphors aren't accidental. They come from there being a resonance that allows us to grab a hold of our sensory experience, our immediate use of our bodies, in order to talk about things that we can't grab with our bodies. We can't experience directly. We can't experience the prison system, and we can't experience evil, but we can talk about evil as disgusting, which is a bodily reaction. This gives us a way of somatically interacting with abstractions. That's in fact the only way we can interact with abstractions. So it's really important to watch what metaphors naturally come to mind when we talk about this stuff. But it's always the energy that matters the most. It's not about the words. It's about the energy. The reason I say that is that I've noticed that there's a temporal version of away. And I'm sure that you've picked up on this before too. You just think about it. Or thinking is not the thing. I'm trying to get an alignment between the body resonance and the mind. I'm inviting, here's a very clear thing. I'm trying to distinguish between faith in a way versus devotion to truth. I haven't talked so much about devotion to truth, but we're getting there. We're playing with this. But right now I want to focus on what is this sensation? What is faith in a way? What does believing in the myth of a way feel like in each moment, like putting the wrapper in the trash can and then it's gone. Right? We have captured the criminal and then they're gone. Okay? I want to emphasize any one of these is unlikely to be true for everyone, but one of these is likely to be true for any given person in terms of the lived experience of it. Because we live in a culture that is based on away. That's why we're running into these problems. It's another way of articulating the same thing. We have not chosen to take responsibility for everything that we can experience. I'll give some suggestions about what that might look like. A lot of the suggestions are very, very grounded. I find them personally, practically very useful. So far, this sounds like large philosophy about the human race, but this is personally useful for me. I find it very clarifying, and I'm going to point at a bunch of those examples in a moment. This is actually a good moment for me to give a personal kind of example. Okay. So earlier today, I was talking with a group of friends, like I do every Friday morning. And one of them was talking about how she goes through these cycles that I resonate with so well. I mean, this is an example. There's a cycle of, so on the one hand, I really like order and I like everything to be right where it belongs. There's a deep sense of body level ease for me. But sometimes I get a little distracted. Okay. And by the way, I haven't forgotten about the temporal version of away. I'm leaving that as a puzzle to chew in the background for you. But I'll get to it. So there's sometimes I get distracted, and then mess appears magically. I don't know how mess appears. Just from use, from just going, oh, let me just jot this thing down. Right, I need to go take care of this, and I leave what I've jotted down there, and my pens are out, etc. And a mess accumulates. And like if I come right to it, as soon as I can, and then I clean it up, then that's fine. But if I keep not getting quite to it, this actually seems like a good point for me to bring in the temporal thing. Can you feel where the away sense is here? Right? Oh, I'll deal with this mess later. Later has a whole lot of these qualities of away. Later is the temporal version of away. Soon often has that kind of quality too. Oh, I'll get to that soon. Again, it's important to track the energy. How does this actually feel? What is the essence of away? What is the essence of faith in away? What does it feel like to believe that there is this mythical space-time where I can put things and then it is safe to ignore them? Just to notice that feeling. Okay? So if I keep asserting to myself, okay, I'll take care of this later, okay, then stuff accumulates. And I end up with a big mess. As messes go, this is actually not very big. This is the result of cleaning out my closet. But I end up with a whole lot of mess, and then there's this peak of frustration. Although when my friend was articulating this, she was describing this sense of a kind of shame, I want to say. Like, what does this say about me that I'm such a messy person? And then she would judge herself for it. And eventually the discomfort of that would reach a peak, and she would go on this flurry of tidying things up. I would do something much the same. It's just mine is more frustration flavored than shame flavored. So the thing is that at the moment of using the negative feeling in order to quickly clean things up, this is coming from a judgment against the part that created the mess in the first place. the creation of the mess wasn't just purely from faith in a way. There is stuff about being more invested in whatever kind of creative project I'm doing, or whatever, uh, like maybe I'm too tired and my body needs rest, and this means that I drink from a cup and then I put it down, and I don't have the energy to go take care of it properly, and I need a break, and I'm just going to watch a video, like some kind of nice video of that it's nice and distracting, um, that lets me ignore everything. The general premise of ignorance, like the temptation of ignorance, but also the rest and spaciousness that is available to that. So, like there are these inclinations in me that cause me to create this mess in the first place. And if I'm judging those and trying to distance myself from them, what am I trying to do to these parts of me, these emotions, these attitudes, these functions? I'm trying to make them go away. And their expression shows up in my physical environment as the mess, which I'm also trying to make go away. And maybe I can make it go away immediately for a little while with a burst of willpower and energy and time. But it costs me willpower, energy, and time, and I haven't addressed the real cause, so the mess creeps back in. Right. So this is a psychological example. It's a little subtle. Maybe a much clearer example. This is an example type. This isn't my own personal lived experience. But the thing of the stereotype of the jock who's really like homophobic, basically, because he notices these arousal feelings in interacting with some guys and can't stand that in himself. He judges it so hard, and he needs that feeling to go away. So he does all of this internal work to keep that experience from being part of his consciousness. It's the same mechanism. Faith in a way that there's some place that I could put some part of me so that I don't have to have any responsibility for it anymore. So, feeling all of that. I hope it's clear what I'm pointing at. There's a very specific experience. It's very precise. Very, very precise. And part of what had me just slow down and take a breath was that I started to notice how I wanted to make sure that this presentation, this offering, this putting a tool forward, is coming across well, that it's clear. And I noticed a worry bubbling up. How am I coming across? Am I coming across well? When it's no longer just something I am caring for, but it becomes something I worry about, so that it becomes about me, this is a sign that there is some kind of feeling in me, some kind of want, some kind of way of being that I'm putting this away feeling towards, I'm putting this kind of pressure, trying to press it out of my consciousness. I have learned that if I slow down and I feel the stillness, and I take a breath and I ground in this moment, I feel more integrated because I'm here and I'm now. And this is the only place and time where things can integrate. Otherwise, we return to what I was calling in a previous video, mind shatter. I go into mind shatter. And just be here. And being here and in touch with the stillness, I could then notice, oh, here is this feeling of away. faith in a way specifically, this desire to trust in a way, or inclination, I should say, more like a habit of trusting in a way, a habit of ignoring, a habit of ignorance. It's a bit of a wordplay, but I think it's accurate. When the Buddha said, I think it's the Buddha that said this, Buddhism certainly says this, that ignorance is the root of all suffering. It didn't mean quite the same thing, or at least depending on which interpretation of the Buddha you go into. He may not have meant the same thing that I mean when I'm talking about ignorance, a tendency to ignore. But I want to say something like, if he didn't mean that, then he should have. Or at least this does something very, very similar from what I can tell. Noticing that there is this gravitational pull towards ignoring, that there is a culture of encouraging ignoring, dismissal, push it out of sight, out of mind. Not my problem, someone else's problem, SEP field. What can we possibly do? There are savior versions of this. This is one of the gates into Cartman's triangle, into the victim triangle. There's a savior or rescuer pattern that takes the form of, you have to take responsibility for this problem. We all do, and you are in particular are not taking responsibility, and you need to. This is a lot of the tone that I think many people pick up on. I've certainly picked up on this quite a lot. At least I've projected it, and therefore I've received it. So my experience has been from a lot of activism, the narrative that gets directed to me of, well, come on, there's this big problem, you could help. If you're not helping, why not? Environmentalism, social justice, human extinction from artificial intelligence. Like, take your pick, take your topic. But the issue comes from, where is the energy to point coming from? I think there's a heat and anger that is the loudest and is the easiest to see. But I bet down at the root, each time I've experienced this, when I've been the finger pointer, I've been the finger pointer plenty. I don't mean to say, look at all these stupid people, look at how stupid they are. I mean, like, no, this is a human challenge, and I totally share in it. It's a lot of what this whole series is about, is finding ways of letting go of any inclination to lean in that direction. To stop believing in a way. Because in me, the thing that has me pointing is the fact that there is an uncomfortable experience in me that I want to get away from. And that often what I'm pointing my finger at and what I'm saying is something that I am doing inside myself. And that I'm projecting it outward to avoid seeing what it is that I am disowning, what parts of me I am trying to send to hell, what parts I'm trying to make go away. So my impression is that faith in a way is almost perfectly symmetric to, like it's the inversion of, or trust in a way, I should say, the habitual trust in a way. Ignorance is a reflection of devotion to truth. I notice that as a human being, and apparently as an unusually smart human being, I seem to have this mind that lets me understand and see so vastly more than my physical senses can pick up on. I can extend my physical senses into the world vastly. I can see how this creates access to power. I can understand physics and mathematics and programming. I can understand ecology and systems. I can understand politics on a national and international scale. I can understand ideas that people who were alive thousands of years ago spoke, and I can recite their words accurately. This is a massive extension of the senses, a massive extension of capacity, and it extends so profoundly, with so much potence, that I can see. Like part of what this sense extension has allowed me to do is I can see why nature has a hard time keeping up with this degree of impact. Why nature's only response is basically to use a cudgel. Or cudgel. I think there's no extra L in there. A cudgel. Like, whoomp. To me, it seems metaphorically appropriate that it's a virus that brings human civilization to its knees. As opposed to just another wave of some kind of social movement like Nazism. Nazism couldn't do something nearly as effective for grinding the whole world to a halt as this disease, or at the very least, the fear of the disease. And what I'm saying is independent of whatever paradigm you're currently living in. Well, not totally independent, it requires a cluster, but the chances are if you're listening to this video, you live in one of the clusters that this applies to. So when I look at all of that, and I notice, okay, I have all of this, with great power comes great responsibility, Spider-Man, or Spider-Man's uncle specifically, Uncle Ben, I think it was. There's something about in each moment, in each and every moment, I have an opportunity. I have a choice. How much am I caring for the knock-on effects of what I am encountering and what I am interacting with, and in particular, what I'm doing? Like right now, I could vent about, I don't know if right now I could, but if I had something emotionally activated for me, and I could dig down and I could have some kind of rant. I don't know, like there are some ways where I still, for instance, I still carry some pain that I find I have a lot of space for now. I'm a lot more able to function with it, but I still carry some pain from some interactions that I had in the Bay Area right before I left, or for a couple of years prior. Like there's some just lingering hurts and things and bits there. And I could use this space in order to just unleash. And it would feel good to vent, particularly because I know some people watching this know some of the people that I've had some tensions with. And then I could do something like buckle down in terms of just saying, look, this is my space. If you don't want to listen to my venting, then don't watch my videos, yada, yada. And then just disown the effect that I have that echoes through the rest of even just my immediate social circles. Just like, I mean, the reason I don't do something like that is because that is one choice. Like that is one option, is being able to just vent and let it go out and just, there are my feelings. If you watch the behavior of a toddler, it's very clear that they're living in that experience. They're fully owning and experiencing their feelings, and their feelings go through them, and there's a tremendous freedom. I think that freedom is incredibly important. And part of the reason the toddler has that degree of freedom is because they don't have the cognitive capacity yet to understand the implications on the family dynamics of their meltdown. It's just not in their repertoire. And as it grows into their repertoire, often, well, in practice, often what happens is that the surrounding adults impose an inherited trauma onto the child so that the child restricts their feelings. I think that part is unnecessary. And I would love to see a world, I really want to live to see a world where children are reliably raised without receiving those kinds of traumatic threads, that every child grows up fully awake and alert. I really want to see that, and I want to encourage that. Um, but if you look at the kind of emotional outbursts of a toddler, a lot of that is coming from the fact that they aren't tracking the effects of what they're doing. If they could track the effects and they cared, which most toddlers naturally will come to, then there would be this heart syncing up of, oh, I have this want, and I care about you, and I'm really confused about what to do about that. And in the course of conversing about that, the upsetness and the care are in active dialogue. Right? That's actually kind of what it feels like in my current relationship with my girlfriend. There's a feeling of both of us actively bringing up even these very childlike parts of us, this very open sense of whatever we feel and however we are can be on the table in front of us. And sometimes we don't know how to sort it all out, but we do know that we are devoted to truth. Right? So that's the other choice. So one option is this, right, unleashing emotions and just saying whatever, they're just my feelings and I have a right to feel however I feel and whatevs. Right? That whatevs kind of attitude is a way. It is trusting in a way. Not my problem. You're upset. Why are you getting upset at me? Oh, like being victimized by the impact of what I've already done. The other option is instead to see all of this, and instead of believing in a way, and this is not a cognitive belief, this is like a somatic thing. The same thing that had me throw away the wrapper, and without that sign, I wouldn't have even noticed that it had left my world. I was ignorant of my own ignorance. So I can instead, in each moment, move towards, let me recognize what is true. I don't need to take responsibility like an obligation. I notice that makes me cringe, and it actually reduces the clarity of my sight and my in-touchedness with reality. When I go, oh man, but now I have to do something with this hamburger wrapper. Maybe I have to become vegetarian so I'm not eating anything with wrappers. And because of all the impacts on the environment, and I need to make sure I buy things that don't have wrappers in them. Maybe I have to grow my own food, but where do I get the fertilizer? The fertilizer is part of the whole oil industry. How do I deal with it? The problem is we are in a system that systematically has faith in a way. Lived embodied faith. It's basically impossible to engage in this culture without engaging in some things that have impacts along the lines of putting pieces of our reality into hell. Shove it into the land of it doesn't belong here. Hell being the collective name I'm giving for all of the places where we put things away and then no one wants anything to do with them. So instead of trying to prescribe actions, actions are the downstream effect of choosing what energy I'm aligning with. Instead, I can look at this and go, I prefer to see reality clearly. So when I am taking this wrapper and I am putting it in the trash, I can take a moment and register what I am doing. This isn't going away. This is going into the trash bin, where it will go into the garbage pail out in front, where a garbage truck will pick up the garbage and take it to, I think, a dump, where it will sit for a long time until the human race pays attention like this and chooses to clean these things up. Or until Mother Nature's evolution, biological evolution, actually catches up and starts to figure out how to convert all of that landfill into something that living systems can use, which might not be very healthy or good for humans. Because we're saying, Mother Nature, take care of this for me. Take care of this mess. Like when we were children, when we were babes, and like evolutionary babes, and we were just throwing the bones into the bushes, or the apple core down towards the trees, and you just take care of it for us. Can you just take care of all of this for us? The same thing in our own psyches. I don't like this emotion. I don't like the emotional reaction that I had to this situation. So, whatever is the larger force, this isn't even Mother Nature, this is something else. Right? Take this away, deal with it for me. I don't even care who deals with it, just not me. When we, as a species, grow up enough to recognize that we are the stewards of everything that we touch, then we will clean up our landfills and our oceans and our skies and our hearts and our psyches and our economic systems. We will notice that there is no way, so you can't put people there. Prison reform happens, not because we can see the logic of how it should work, but because we recognize that there is this way in which we have been treating prisons as some kind of weird mix of all kinds of different functions, but the main one is as a landfill for human trash. That's not a matter of shame. Shame is one of the mechanisms by which the mind flinches and closes the eyes. Oh God. And you notice the oh God covering the eyes. I don't want to see. So when talking with my friend this morning, it came up how one person proposed when like you can't have things in perfect order because perfect order is only if you're not using anything. So as soon as you use anything, like if I pull out my notebook and a pen, now the notebook and pen aren't where they belong. But I would argue that the essence of this choice between blindly trusting in a way, trusting that someone else or something else, I don't even care who or what, will handle it for me, versus I prefer truth. Over anything, I prefer truth. That choice in each moment shows up as, for me, I pull out my notebook and I see my notebook right there. And I pull out my pen. And I'm holding my pen and my notebook, and there is active engagement in this is what I am doing. Maybe I have finished drinking my tea and I set my tea mug off to the side. It is now something for me to deal with later, but instead of later being whatever, I don't have to think about it. Later is I set it down and I recognize I am putting it here. And there is a sense of this is still in my world. It is not away, it is right here. I don't have to pay attention to it, but I will. And this is how I'll do so. My experience is often, I put the cup here, and now I have my notebook and my pen, and these are exactly where they're supposed to be. This is where I have chosen for them to be. I'm engaging with them, I'm writing with them. And then when I am done, I cap the pen, I put it back in its container. I use a fountain pen. So part of it is because I notice myself leaning in the direction of going zero waste as this clicked for me. So I now use a fountain pen because I'm not throwing away a pen, throwing away a pen each time I am done with the pen. Instead, I just buy ink in glass jars because glass is recyclable. The plastic lids aren't. The plastic lids live in landfill. But I'm conscious of each piece and I can see, oh, this is how I'm interacting with it. I'm not actually zero waste, like I said before. It's not really possible to live in this society and be zero waste. It's not functional. But I can move in that direction, and I have been. So that's why I have a little container for my pen. It's like taking care of my things. This is part of it, when I'm actually taking responsibility for everything I can reach, and I can reach a lot. I'm taking care of not just responsibility. It's not my job to deal with the landfill, but it is my job to orient to my impact on the landfill. Because if it's not my job to orient to my impact on the landfill, whose job is it? If it's someone else's job, then they have to manipulate me in order to get me to do something that is kind for the landfill. And that is them caring for the landfill in a manipulative way because I'm abandoning myself. So the strongest contribution I can give to a clean world in every sense, internal and external, socially, physically, psychologically, emotionally, is to notice how I am caring for my things. Close the lid, set the pen where it belongs. I turn to my notebook. The notebook goes back where it belongs once I'm done with it. And then, and now, it is time to deal with the teacup. There's a very Zen-like quality to this. That everything in my world I can bring attention to. Or I can grab the teacup and then start thinking about what I'm going to be doing later in the afternoon and kind of go down and toss the teacup into the dishwasher because now it's away. And yeah, there's a way where that gets taken care of and I can trust in the automaticity of the dishwasher. And it happens to work because the physical world has some systems for holding each of these pieces. I don't have to mentally remember. The flip side is not about mentally remembering all of these things, but rather about recognizing that nothing actually leaves my world. Occasionally something might. Like if I notice that there is a story in me about how terribly I was victimized by some of these interactions with people in the Bay Area, for instance, if I can really roll into that, I can look at that and go, oh, I don't want to make these feelings go away, but it is time to digest them and integrate them, to recognize how much I was hurt, that it's okay for me to feel hurt, and that there's anger, and there is pride from the sense of having separated, and there's a sense of, here are some details where I could have a cleaner interaction, and these are part of my ongoing work. Okay, right there, I see. And I can then write down, part of feeling this is I can write down on a piece of paper all of these feelings that I have, including this, how dare they, blah, 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 like victim, I'm so tormented, like what, and I don't have to mock it there, I'm making it clear what the energy is. I'm trying to make it clear what the energy is without going into content. And then I can take that piece of paper and I can ceremonially burn it into ash. Now the ash is still there. There's still something to do with the ash. I have transformed this into something else. Now I can take that something else and take it to some of the plants that we have around in the lawn and return this bit of converted tree and this particular kind of ink back to the earth to encourage the nourishment. Of course, with ash, I could just dust it into the sky and Mother Nature would take care of it. But there's something about the intentional noticing what is each part of this process doing. In that I've not made something go away, I have held it through its completion process. Much the same way that women don't make their pregnancy go away by giving birth. There's a caring and a holding with each step. I know that may have seemed abstract, but this is, I'm hoping that this is highlighting a lived experience. This is not something about, well, so what does that mean I do this afternoon? No, it's about what happens right now. Right now. Is there a sense of me pushing anything away? I can either ignore that, practice ignorance, and just continue to do the automatic thing I always do, keep doing my same habits. Or I can say, I don't know what is true, but I do know that I desire to prefer truth over anything else. So this is the path to the alleviation of the problem of evil. I talked about that in a previous video. I'm not going to try to go through the logic here. I prefer truth. I prefer to take responsibility for my presence in the world. That doesn't mean I take responsibility for everything I experience, but I do take responsibility for my impact. And that doesn't mean I take responsibility the way that other people think I should. That means I take responsibility by actually paying attention and seeing clearly what's true. In every moment, that's the choice. Do I keep trusting away? Or do I devote to truth right now? I hope that was clear. I aspire to ring with this clarity in myself, and I hope that it conveys well. I would love to actually hear comments, if you've gotten this far, about your experience encountering this and playing with it. And so feel free to leave comments. If you leave comments on the replay on Facebook, I'm going to leave this on Facebook and also put it on YouTube. But because of a setting in Facebook that I haven't seen how to change, I don't see people's comments in my Facebook Lives unless they tag me. So if you notice how this lives in your experience, it would be really cool to hear examples, to read about them. Okay, so with that, I'll close. Thank you for listening.